Success does not belong to the most talented. It belongs to those who take action. Consistently, relentlessly, and without waiting to feel ready. You see, the world doesn't reward intentions. It doesn't pay us for good ideas we never start or plans we never execute. It only responds to action. People talk about motivation like it's some magical force that shows up on sunny mornings and pushes you into greatness. They imagine high achievers wake up feeling excited, full of energy, ready to conquer the world. But here's what most don't realize. Motivation is not how success begins. It's what follows action. This misunderstanding ruins more dreams than failure ever will. Because when you believe you must feel ready to act, you train yourself to sit still until the stars align. You wait for the perfect time, the right mood, or a sign from the universe. And in that waiting, days turn into weeks, and weeks into years. Think of how often you've said to yourself, "I'll start when I feel more confident," or "I'll begin once I'm in the right mindset." But what happens? You don't feel ready the next day or the next. And over time, what you're really doing is rehearsing hesitation. You're mastering the art of delay. Motivation is a liar. It promises to come, but it rarely does on its own. It waits for you to move first. Consider someone who wants to get in shape. They watch workout videos, read articles, scroll past transformation stories, but every morning they say, "Not today. I'm too tired. I don't feel it." Weeks pass, guilt builds. They don't feel better, they feel worse. Not because they're lazy, not because they're incapable, but because they're stuck in the trap of waiting to feel inspired before taking action. Now imagine that same person, exhausted, no motivation at all, puts on their shoes and says, "Just 10 minutes. That's all." The first few steps are slow, the body resists, but halfway through, something changes. The heart rate rises, the mind clears, energy shows up. That's not inspiration. Action creates momentum, and momentum is stronger than motivation. Inertia is real. A body at rest stays at rest. A life at rest does too. You cannot think your way out of inaction. You must move your way out of it. There's a woman named Carla who used to tell herself she couldn't start her business because she didn't feel ready. She was waiting for confidence, for clarity, for courage. Every year she made a vision board. Every year she said, "Next year will be different." And every year looked exactly the same. Until one day she heard a speaker say, "Clarity comes from engagement, not thought." That hit her. She realized she wouldn't suddenly become ready. She had to make herself ready by starting. So she launched with no website, no perfect plan, and just one small client. From that one action came another, and another. 3 years later, she has a 6-figure business, not because she waited to feel confident, because she moved before she felt anything at all. This is the pattern across every meaningful achievement in history, from scientists to athletes to artists. They began with uncertainty, but they acted anyway. Thomason didn't wait for inspiration to invent the light bulb. He showed up every day, testing, failing, adjusting, over 1,000 failed attempts. Not because he was driven by constant motivation, but because he built the habit of action. Writers don't publish books because they felt perfectly inspired every day. They publish books because they wrote when they were tired, distracted, discouraged. They sat down and typed one word, then the next, and eventually the words found them. Motivation is a bonus, not a requirement. The trick is to lower the threshold for action. Don't wait for a wave of energy to hit you. Don't wait to feel ready to tackle the whole mountain. Just do something. Start small. Send the email, open the document, make the list, take the walk. The size of the step doesn't matter, it's the fact that you stepped. Every time you act without waiting to feel like it, you train your brain to take you seriously. You build trust with yourself. And that trust is what transforms lives. The most powerful people in the world aren't the most talented, they're the ones who stopped waiting. They felt the fear and moved anyway. They felt the doubt and did it anyway. They didn't sit around for lightning to strike. They struck the match themselves. And if you want to change your life, your health, your career, your relationships, your future, you must do the same. You must force yourself to move, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. Because action doesn't just change your circumstances, it changes you. Avoiding action may feel comfortable in the moment. It gives you relief from pressure, shields you from risk, and keeps you in familiar territory. But over time, it becomes a quiet, suffocating kind of pain. The pain of knowing you could have done more, become more, lived more. People fear taking action because they associate it with discomfort. And yes, action comes with effort. It comes with failure, with fear of judgment. But these are temporary struggles. What lasts much longer, often for a lifetime, is the regret of knowing you didn't try. There's a common illusion we all fall for, that staying in place keeps us safe. But inaction is not neutral. It has consequences. Every time you delay, you're not just postponing progress, you're accepting a version of life that's smaller than what you deserve. Imagine someone who dreams of switching careers. They feel stuck in a job that drains them. Every Monday morning feels like a countdown to Friday. They spend lunch breaks scrolling job listings, watching others live the life they want. But they never apply. They tell themselves, now's not the right time. What if I fail? What if I'm not qualified? The years pass, and one day they look back and realize they traded their dreams for security that never made them feel secure. That's the weight of inaction. It builds slowly, but it never lets go. Action, on the other hand, might be scary. It might lead to rejection, but it moves you. It stretches you. It teaches you. Even if you fall short, you grow stronger. Even if you fail, you gain clarity. The sting of trying and falling is nothing compared to the slow burn of never knowing what could have been. Talk to people in their later years. Ask them what they regret. You'll rarely hear them say, I regret taking that risk, or I wish I'd played it safer. What they say is, I wish I'd followed my heart. I wish I'd started sooner. I wish I hadn't cared so much what others thought. Real pain doesn't come from taking a leap. It comes from standing at the edge your entire life, wondering what flying could have felt like. There's a man named Daniel who always dreamed of becoming a chef. For years he cooked for friends, wrote recipes, imagined opening his own restaurant. But he stayed at his office job. It paid well, and everyone told him he'd be crazy to leave it. He told himself he was being responsible. But every time he passed a local bistro, his stomach twisted. It wasn't hunger, it was longing. Years later, after a layoff, he finally tried. He started with weekend catering, then small events. Eventually, he opened a food truck. It wasn't easy. It took grit and long nights, but the pain of working on his feet paled in comparison to the pain of waiting. He says now, every time I chop an onion, I feel more alive than I did in 20 years behind a desk. What Daniel learned, what so many people learn too late, is that pain is part of life, but you get to choose your pain. The pain of growth or the pain of regret. The pain of discipline or the pain of disappointment. One demands effort. The other drains your spirit. Even neuroscientists have studied this phenomenon. The emotional centers of the brain light up more intensely when people recall regrets tied to inaction than those tied to action. That means we carry the weight of what we didn't do more deeply than the mistakes we made. This is why people stay in unhappy relationships, or don't speak up in meetings, or let their dreams collect dust. It feels easier to avoid the immediate discomfort of taking action, but it quietly shapes a future filled with dissatisfaction. Action gives you feedback. It gives you course correction. You can pivot, adapt, and evolve. Inaction gives you nothing. No growth, no story. Just empty space where something meaningful could have lived. You don't have to know exactly where you're going, you just have to move. Progress doesn't happen when you feel safe. It happens when you decide that staying still costs more than stepping forward. The pain of action is temporary, but the pain of wondering, what if, can follow you forever. People talk about fear of failure like it's the worst thing in the world. But failure is survivable. You can recover from a failed business, a rejected proposal, a missed shot. What's much harder to recover from is a life unlived. And while you're sitting there thinking, doubting, hesitating, time is moving. Opportunities are passing. The version of you that you could become is getting further away. You don't have to leap, just step. And when the fear says, what if it goes wrong? Ask yourself, what if I stay stuck? That question has a far scarier answer. Your identity isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, piece by piece, step by step, action by action. P.S. When you become unsanctioned, who you believe you are is shaped by what you do, not what you intend. Every decision, every habit, every risk or hesitation is a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. People often say things like, I'm just not a disciplined person, or I'm not confident, or I'm not the kind of person who takes big risks. But those aren't truths. They're stories. Stories built on past behavior, not permanent reality. You don't lack character traits, you lack proof of them. And the only way to create that proof is by taking action. When you show up consistently, when you push through resistance, when you do hard things even when they're uncomfortable, you start seeing yourself differently. You stop saying, I want to be a leader, and start believing I am one. A person becomes reliable by showing up on time, not by reading about reliability. A person becomes a writer by writing every day, even if most of what they write never gets seen. A person becomes brave by doing the things that scare them. You don't earn courage by thinking about it. You earn it by taking action while fear is still in the room. Habits are not just tasks, they're identity statements. When you act like someone who prioritizes health, your brain starts to identify as someone who takes care of their body. When you act like someone who follows through on promises, you begin to see yourself as trustworthy. You shift your internal narrative from, "I wish I was that kind of person," to, "This is who I am." There's a young man named Luis who used to describe himself as lazy. He believed it because he had years of evidence: missed deadlines, skipped gym sessions, late mornings. But one day he set a rule for himself. Every morning, before anything else, he would make his bed, drink a glass of water, and write down 3 tasks. That's it. It seemed too small to matter, but those tiny acts of discipline started to change how he saw himself. After 2 weeks, he added a workout. After a month, he stopped calling himself lazy. Not because of some external praise or dramatic transformation, but because his actions gave him new evidence. He didn't wait to believe he was capable. He behaved like he was, and the belief followed. Your mind watches everything you do. When you break promises to yourself, you train it not to trust you. When you say you'll start tomorrow and don't, you build an identity of avoidance. But when you act in alignment with your goals, no matter how small the steps, you build credibility with yourself. And that is what changes lives. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, wrote that every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. The more votes you cast, the more solid that identity becomes. You don't need to be perfect. You just need enough votes to win the election. Think of the power in that idea. You don't have to overhaul your life in a day. You just have to take consistent action, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. Because every time you do, you reinforce the identity you want to live out. If you want to become a confident speaker, you don't need to book a stadium. Start by speaking up in one meeting. If you want to be a disciplined person, you don't need to wake up at 5 a.m. and run 10 miles. Start by getting out of bed when the alarm rings. That one act is a message to your brain. I am becoming someone who follows through. Behavior shapes belief, not the other way around. You don't need permission to transform. You don't need to wait until you feel like the person you want to become. You just need to act like them, one decision at a time. This is how people change, not through massive overnight shifts, but through daily decisions that gradually reshape their view of themselves. A woman who once called herself shy begins speaking up more often. A man who saw himself as a failure starts finishing projects. A student who doubted their intelligence begins studying for 20 minutes each night. And suddenly, they're getting results. Not because they became different overnight, because they acted like the person they wanted to be long enough to become them. Action is identity in motion. If you want to shift who you are, don't just think differently. Don't just hope differently. Act differently, and let your actions rewrite the story you've been telling yourself. Fear is natural. It exists to protect you, but when left unchecked, fear doesn't just keep you safe, it keeps you stuck. It stops you from speaking up, from starting, from showing up fully in your own life. Most people try to wait fear out. They think if they read enough books, gather enough information, wait for the right moment, the fear will go away. But fear doesn't leave on its own. It only quiets down when you walk through it. No one overcomes fear by sitting still. Action is the only cure. Think about your own life. How many times have you been afraid of doing something new, applying for a job, giving a presentation, starting a project, only to find that once you began, the fear didn't grow stronger, it got weaker? Fear loses its grip the moment you do the thing it told you not to do. It's easy to believe the lie that you need to feel fearless before taking a leap, that you need to build up courage first. But courage is not a prerequisite, it's a result. It's what you earn by walking straight into what scares you. There's a young woman named Naomi who had a lifelong fear of public speaking. Even in small meetings, her heart would race, her hands would shake. She avoided every opportunity to speak in front of others, telling herself, "I'm just not a public speaker." She thought the fear would always be there, so she shaped her life around avoiding it. One day, she got promoted and had no choice. She was asked to present to a small group. Her first instinct was panic, but this time instead of saying no, she said yes. Even though every nerve in her body told her to run, she prepared, she practiced, and when the day came, she was terrified, but she spoke. Her voice shook, but she made it through. And the moment she sat down, something shifted. She realized the fear didn't destroy her, it didn't even define her. That moment didn't just change her job, it changed her identity. She stopped seeing herself as someone who can't and started seeing herself as someone who does. Not because the fear vanished, but because she moved anyway. Fear feeds on avoidance. The more you run from it, the stronger it becomes. It grows in the shadows of inaction. But when you shine the light of action on it, it shrinks. Soldiers on the battlefield aren't fearless. They act in spite of fear. That's what courage is, doing the thing even when you're scared. Every act of bravery you've ever witnessed or admired wasn't the result of a fearless person. It was the result of someone who moved forward while their hands trembled and their stomach turned. The human brain is wired for survival. It will signal fear anytime there's uncertainty, risk, or change. That's why even small steps, starting a business, posting your thoughts online, having a tough conversation, can feel terrifying. Your brain thinks it's protecting you, but growth lives in that space your brain tells you to avoid. There's a reason action is so powerful against fear. It gives you new data. Fear says, you'll fail. Action says, let's find out. Fear says, you can't handle this. Action proves you can. Once you take the first step, your brain sees that you survived. That's when the fear begins to fade. Fear doesn't disappear before the leap. It dissolves during the landing. A study from the University of California found that people consistently overestimate how painful or embarrassing a feared action will be. Whether it's public speaking, confronting someone, or trying something new, the anticipation of fear is always worse than the reality. The brain exaggerates threats, but once you act, reality steps in, and most of the imagined consequences never happen. The fear of failure? It's a projection. The fear of embarrassment? It's often inflated. The fear of rejection? More about your self-perception than how others actually respond. Action grounds you. It takes you out of your imagination and into real experience. Even if you fail, you're still ahead of where you were. You've gathered information. You've stretched your limits. You've built resilience. You've weakened fear's control over you because now you know what it feels like to walk through it and survive. Every time you act in the presence of fear, you take back power. You prove to yourself that fear may visit, but it doesn't get to lead. You don't need to be fearless to move forward. You just need to decide that your dreams are more important than your discomfort. You can feel the fear and still take the step. And when you do, you teach fear that you are not its prisoner. You are its master. People don't start because they can't see the whole path. They want certainty. They want to know every detail before they take the leap. But life doesn't work that way. Success doesn't reveal itself all at once. It unfolds in layers. One step leads to the next. The desire to figure everything out in advance becomes a prison. People wait for clarity before they act, not realizing that clarity comes from action. No one builds a meaningful life by standing still and thinking. They build it by moving, failing, adjusting, and continuing forward. That's how the staircase appears. One step at a time, never all at once. There's a man named David who wanted to start a business. He read every book, watched every video, followed every expert. But for 5 years, he didn't launch. Why? Because he didn't know how to find investors, or how to scale, or what to do 5 years down the road. So he stayed frozen at the base of the staircase, staring up, overwhelmed. What changed his life wasn't a perfect plan. It was a decision to take the first step. Creating a simple website and offering his services to one person. That action didn't answer every question, but it answered the first one. And from that point, the next step revealed itself. Not all at once, just enough to keep moving. This is how everything works. The book begins with a blank page. The marathon begins with one run around the block. The relationship begins with one conversation. The transformation begins with one small, often uncomfortable decision to act. Most people never begin because they try to plan for step 20 before taking step 1. They want guarantees, but progress doesn't come with guarantees. It comes with momentum. Your job is not to have everything figured out. Your job is to move. Movement creates opportunities you can't see from the starting line. Doors don't open until you knock. People don't show up until you take space in the world. Resources don't find you until you begin building something worth supporting. Even Google Maps doesn't show the full path until you enter a destination and begin driving. It doesn't display every turn at once. It tells you, turn left in 500 feet. Then it gives you the next step. Life works the same way. This is not just philosophy. It's how the brain works. The human mind is wired to solve problems in real time. When you start a task, your brain activates a network called the task positive network. This part of your brain doesn't fire when you're just thinking about doing something. It activates once you start, once you move. That's why people often feel more capable after they begin than before. The brain works with you once you signal, we're doing this. Until then, it gives you hesitation, doubt, and mental fog. You don't need motivation. You don't need certainty. You need a starting point. Think about a person who wants to get healthier. They don't need to master nutrition science or hire a top trainer on day 1. They need to go for a walk. That's it. That first walk builds evidence. It changes their internal dialogue from, I'm out of shape, to, I'm taking control. That identity shift leads to another action, which leads to another, and the staircase begins to form. Action isn't just how you make progress. It's how you discover what's possible. The person you're going to become is someone you haven't met yet. and you'll never meet them standing still. You meet them one decision at a time. People often say, "I don't know where to begin." But deep down, most people do. They just don't think the step they see is big enough. They underestimate the power of small beginnings. They want to launch at the top instead of starting where they are. But the first step isn't supposed to be impressive. It's supposed to be real, honest, immediate. That's where the journey begins. The Wright brothers didn't have a blueprint for flight. They didn't wait until they had global support or a clear plan for commercial aviation. They built wooden frames and tested them in fields. They learned by trying, failing, and trying again. The sky didn't open for them because they had the best idea. It opened because they took the first step when others were still dreaming. You don't need permission. You don't need perfection. You need the courage to move, even if your hands are shaking and your vision isn't clear. Clarity is earned. Momentum is built. Confidence is grown. And it all starts the moment you take that first small step. Every idea, every plan, every dream you've ever had, none of it means anything without action. Thought alone cannot build the life you want. It's what you do that creates change. You don't need to wait for motivation. That's the illusion that's kept millions stuck, hoping to feel ready before they begin. But readiness isn't a feeling. It's a decision. You decide to start. And the moment you act, motivation will follow. You don't need to avoid pain. There is pain in every path, but the pain of never trying is far worse than the pain of failing. One will break you open and shape you. The other will slowly wear you down from the inside. One is the price of growth. The other is the cost of regret. You don't need to become someone else. You need to behave like the person you want to be. Action builds identity. Each choice you make is shaping the story you live. Your habits, your routines, your small daily steps, that's who you are becoming. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be brave. Fear will always be there, but it doesn't have to control you. The only way out of fear is through it. And the only way through it is action. Move anyway. Speak anyway. Try anyway. You don't need the full picture, you just need to begin. The path will not reveal itself until you start walking. Don't wait to see the whole staircase. Take the first step, even if it's shaky, even if it's small, especially if it's small. All the power, all the clarity, all the confidence you've been searching for, it lives on the other side of your first step. This moment right now, it's not just another moment, it's your chance, your signal, your invitation. Force yourself to move. Not because it's easy, not because it's guaranteed, but because staying where you are is no longer an option. You were not born to watch your life happen. You were born to build it. So build, move, act. Your future is waiting for you, but it won't wait forever. Take the step now.